Economic and social changes. Economic progress up to the year 600 BC is our concern here. Colonization was the product of so many local and general factors and was so widely launched that it continued on through the 6th century and even into the Classic period. The effects of this expansion were far-reaching and long-lasting as far as the homeland was concerned. Greece was already moving forward rapidly when colonization began, but the geographical enlargement of the Aegean world helped to speed its development. Now it talks about how agriculture grew and grew, and at a certain point the lions and other wild animals prominent in the mythical age retreated far into the mountains, where shepherds still watched their flocks. Let me skip a ways down. Almost all the techniques of working stone, metal, etc. were borrowed from the Near East. Throughout the rest of Greek and Roman history, very little further innovation took place, but above all, an increase in output required more hands. You know, if you don't have a better machine, then you have to get a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth. Either that or get a better one. So if you're just using the same methods you've used for centuries, then you're just going to have twice as many men to mine twice as much metal to get more metal. Some men were available from the nearby countryside in the form of dispossessed or discontented peasants. Others were acquired by purchase as slaves from abroad. Now those discontented peasants wouldn't be available unless there's food to feed them, so they might be discontented in the sense that there's enough food being produced because there's productivity right now, not widespread war or something. Discontented peasants, there we are again. Others were acquired by purchase as slaves from abroad. Industrial slavery never became the backbone of Greek economic life, but the more advanced states had thenceforth extensive slave elements. And we actually read in one of the books about Abraham Lincoln that the Industrial Revolution, who was it? Paul Johnson said that slavery was created by the Industrial Revolution. And here we have major Greek states with slavery. Bonehead. He must mean it in a different way. Improvements in trade also occurred. Better ships were already available and were built and used in a great number. Efforts to improve harbors were underway by 600 BC. Some traders took the risks and chances of great profits in the long-range trade. We are told of Coleius from Samos, who was blown by a storm to Spanish Tartessus in 630 BC, and he made extremely profitable sales of his wares. Other merchants became settled traders in the central kernels of the city-states, a form of economic specialization which surpassed anything known in the Near East. As a result, places about the Isthmus of Corinth, such as Corinth, Aegina, and Megara, were real cities by about by about the year 600 BC. Athens lagged behind. Remember, it was a backwater. Lagged behind until this date, and the great period of the Ionian cities was to be the 6th century, around the 500s. So that's about when Athens begins to come into the picture, in about the year 600 and after. If commerce were to be conducted efficiently, it required a better means of exchange than the silver bars common in the Near East. The result was the invention of coinage. The earliest coins, that is, pieces of precious metal stamped to indicate origin and to guarantee value, were issued by about 650 by the kings of Lydia in Asia Minor. Now, they were Greek kings, it was a Greek culture, and they were on Asia Minor, modern Turkey, right across the Aegean Sea from Greece there. These were made of electrum, a natural mixture of gold and silver, and were so valuable that they must have been used in wholesale trade, meaning they were used for big, large exchanges and expenses. Before 600, the more advanced city-states of Asia Minor and Greece were issuing coins of silver in various weights, though local trade, fines, and other payments were still reckoned in terms of agricultural produce or on the basis of barter. So coinage was invented but not yet ubiquitous. So we skip just a bit here. Behind the specific evidence of development in agricultural, commerce, and industry lay, as an impelling force, a revolution in economic attitudes. During the Dark Ages, when men struggled to survive and to hold together the tissue of society, the idea of economic gain or profit had small scope. When the Aegean world grew richer from the 8th century onward and its men became more mobile, the conscious effort to gain economic advantage entered Greek life. He says the one came and then the other. I think they were one and the same phenomenon that assisted one another. But whichever, he's a historian. Thenceforth the economic spirit, as it may be called, was an enduring force of considerable importance in Hellenic civilization, free as it was of absolute kings and powerful priesthoods. I think that's the key to it. He could write that sentence and not quite see it, maybe? I don't know, maybe he did see, but that is the key. The economic spirit took over as the important enduring impetus, because kingship and priesthoods, powerful religious priesthoods, were out, and that's what rules every other society at the time. Early in the 7th century, the poet Hesiod graphically portrayed the contest of potter with potter and endorsed rivalry, so long as it was conducted fairly. By the end of the century, the great reformer Solon of Athens could catalogue in one fragment of his poetry the ways of making money, and concluded that those who are richest, quote, have twice the eagerness that others have. That the growth of these attitudes helped to spur economic progress is obvious. That these attitudes grew and that helped spur economic progress. That their exhibition caused serious social stress is also perceptible. Enter Marxism. That's fine, we've got the evidence. Consolidation of the aristocratic outlook. Something about the standards and the culture of the values of the people of Greece. What did the best men, like the knights in shining armor of the later ages and stuff, what was the early Greek outlook? The upper classes had long been important. When the kings disappeared, they became outwardly dominant, right? Because now they are the ruling classes. Quote, haughty, adorned in well-dressed hair, steeped in the scent of skillfully prepared unguents, end quote, as a later poet scornfully indicted the purple-clad lords of one Asiatic polis. From Xenophane's Fragments. In a book by Kathleen Freeman. I have a book by her. The rich everywhere sought ivories, bronzes, and the latest vases of Corinth, and boasted of their ownership of horses, which they raced in local and international games. In the Greek landscape, horses were hard to feed, and economically were useless, an example of Thurston Veblen's conspicuous consumption. Luxury, to be sure, is always a relative concept, and the monarchs of the Assyrian palaces would have scorned a noble Greek home as a hovel. Yet the visible distinctions between rich and poor grew more obvious in the Aegean world. So there's the bit about horses. But you cannot ignore the fact that they were faster. They would hitch the horse to a chariot, and you could get someplace faster than with an ox, just a lot faster. Alright, now it's got two sentences of tripe. The visible distinctions between rich and poor grew more obvious, and this was a factor for both good and evil. Both the sentences of which are nonsense. The upper classes of Greece were remarkably enthusiastic about culture, and they employed that part of the rising Greek surplus which they garnered to support not only their own luxury, but also the great outburst of arts and letters. Couldn't they consider that to be part of their own luxury? They must have. Like, Mr. Cropper didn't just spend his money on his own luxuries, he collected books. Is that not a luxury? The aristocrats shared, too, a relatively free and sane approach to life, which later permitted the rise of philosophy. The temptations of power, however, all too often led them to oppress the poorer, weaker parts of society. The product was political tension, which often threw up a tyrant. So all he's saying is these societies were subject to the pressures of every other society and all of human